Welcome to Get Better Every Day with Snapper. This is number 2 in a 5-part series on accountability. So what we're doing here is grabbing the ideas and experiences of Ryan as one of the 5 participants in this particular series and trying to figure out how accountability has made an impact in his life. And we'll see if we can come up with something funny while we're doing it. So let's start it out. How do we know each other? We did a podcast together. So here we are again doing another podcast. And tell me a little bit, this is your shameless plug time right here. So Combat Story Podcast, right?
Yeah, right on. So thanks a lot, Vince. It's great to see you again, man. It's crazy to think that there were thousands of people that wanted to see both of our mugs talking about our combat experiences, mainly yours. And yep, so Combat Story is just something that I did when I transitioned out of the CIA. I was in the military first and then CIA. The whole idea is to capture the experiences, what it was like in combat for people who are on the front lines, like yourself in the air and guys on the ground, just to document it and let people tell the story so folks who have never been there can understand what it's really like day in and day out when the sacrifices are happening.
Right on. And it's been very successful. I applaud you, and I got much respect for you for how far you've gone in less than a year with that platform. It's awesome. So yeah, let's touch on a little bit of your professional path through life and get to know you a little bit. So
you got it.
Yeah.
So I think starting out and kind of similar to you, Vince, coming out of, I was an ROTC guy in college. I went to Georgetown on the East Coast. Did Army ROTC and then went straight into the aviation branch. So okay. I was a pilot like yourself, and I did 8 years, just shy of 8 years on the Army side. So I did a tour in Germany with a unit that had just come back. So this was 2000. I came out of college in 2002, right as the war was kicking off. Got to my first unit early 2004 after flight school, and immediately took a platoon. So I had 20 guys. But these folks had just come back from Iraq War, basically.
Okay.
So a whole bunch of combat vets and me, new guy right out of college. So to me, that was pretty tough. I was there for 3 years. We did not deploy, which was also hard. I fought really, really hard to get to we call it the Maneuver Captain's Career Course. So your transition period, most guys go to the Aviation Captain's Career Course to learn how to be company commanders. I went to the maneuver one, which is where the infantry and armor officers go, and then guys who are going into the SF track. And I just wanted to learn, to me, and I think you'll appreciate this, Vince, like they were my customer. You know, like I was an attack pilot. I wanted to know how guys on the ground moved on a target, how they planned missions, what accountability and responsibility meant to them, how they breach, and enter a building, all of that. So I knew how to support them better. So I went from there to Campbell, to Fort Campbell, and I was in the 101st, deployed to Afghanistan in 2008, and I was a company commander there. So we had 8 Apaches, 40 soldiers, half warrant officers, half mechanics. And we did, just like you did, 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365 combat ops covering seven provinces. So that was the tail end of my military career. I got out and did 2 years private sector while getting my security clearance to get to CIA.
Okay.
And I did 8 years at the agency on the ops side of the house.
Nice.
So for that, I ran intel collection programs on a variety of topics: political, military, terrorist related, and cyber. And I spent my last 2 years.
Were you like an ops manager, or were you out there like a field operator?
So we were a field operator. The CIA doesn't have the same track like the military, where you just come in and you're an officer. So everybody comes in and you start out at the bottom and work your way up.
Okay.
So it's kind of an interesting, especially coming from aviation, it's a different way of looking at things. And there are different career thrusts. So you've got case officers, targeters, and all this stuff. Like they have these career thrusts on the website. I was a collection management officer.
Okay.
So my job, I was taught to go out and collect in the field, and I did that. But part of my job was to understand what the people who consumed intel, like the readers of intel, National Security Council, executive leads, country leads, what they needed. I was to understand that and go fill those intel gaps by collecting the right intel and bringing it back to them.
Awesome.
So I did that for 8 years, transitioned out 2 years ago to Silicon Valley. So I work at a massive tech company now, also doing Intel work in this space. So kind of bringing along that some of the expertise I've built up over time. And I manage a small team and a large, we call them a vendor workforce as part of that.
Wow. That's so the podcast then is kind of a side gig for you. You still have a main job with a tech company, providing intel for them, and then your side gig just for funsies is out here doing this really successful podcast. So,
hey man, and if I can, Vince, I would just say, like, when my family and I, when we decided to get out of the agency, it was really hard for me. I loved that job. I love the mission, just like leaving the military, really hard. And I was sitting there like, all right, if I'm not going to do this, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Like, where am I going to find this fulfillment? And I literally was sitting there like writing down ideas. And the one thing I kept coming back to was, if I could just get up every day and talk to guys like you, I'd be happy, man. Perfect. So this is what I do instead of playing golf. Talk to guys like Vince, Eddie Penny, Tom Satterley, these guys. I love it.
Yeah, man, what a great series you got. I don't want to overwhelm with your stuff. Let's get into the main theme here. So trying to distill down some life experiences from hard chargers like yourself on accountability. So your thoughts on the importance of accountability in life, from the aspects or from the perspective of a business owner, father, husband, citizen of the United States perspectives, those type of perspectives. What do you have about personal responsibility and then holding other people's responsible or accountable in your relations with them? Like, how do you have someone within your sphere, how do you hold them accountable for their responsibilities in a way that doesn't like diminish that relationship or make them kind of cower or something like that? Long-winded question. Let's see what you got.
No, I hear you. And I do think it's interesting, as we just talked about this evolution of my career, 20 years of doing this stuff. Some of the principles, especially when it comes to accountability, are completely consistent from leading in the military, CIA, to Silicon Valley. Like, there are some things that just do not change. And I think actually the way we're brought up in the military has been really beneficial to what I do now. Sorry, Vince, I'm losing.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of
sorry, man.
A little bit of reset. Buffer. I think we're good. I think we're good. Press on.
Yep. So just some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, and if we attack this from a professional standpoint first, as I think about accountability, I think about it in two ways. One is this like very tangible, you are the one who is responsible for the success or failure of a plan, a project, a mission, whatever. Like, your head is on the chopping block. If it goes wrong, you take the blame for it. If it succeeds, you share in the success, but other people also get the success. But I think if you distill it down, doesn't matter what I'm working on, business, military, whatever, there's that element. But I think there's something about the way we were trained as in the military as officers and NCOs that this idea of accountability includes inherently a lot of these other attributes we care much about, like integrity, honesty, reliability, responsibility. And it's more of an intangible way that I would look at accountability.
Okay.
And I think that part is unique to those of us who come out of the military that I've seen. Like, I think we bring a lot of these together, and we have a very high standard of accountability for the rest of our lives.
Yes, that's good.
So if I can,
it's like a foundational thing where if you start lying to somebody, then you don't have the ability to maintain accountability because you don't have integrity. So you have no foundation to start from. So if you're lying to somebody, you don't have integrity, then you're not moving to the next step of holding yourself accountable. So
I would agree.
What else?
And I'd say, go ahead, man.
No. Back to
I
you.
was going to say one of the things we do where I'm at now, which is very interesting, a way of approaching accountability. We design projects around a model that was probably designed in an MBA classroom somewhere, but it's called a RASCI model.
Okay.
So it's an acronym. The R is for responsibility, and these are all the roles that you have for a given project. But it could very easily apply to an op when I was at the agency, or a mission, in the military.
Okay.
So you've got like the responsible party for something, and the A is the accountable party. Then you've got like who is supporting, who needs to be consulted, who needs to be informed. So as you build a project, you kind of use this framework to assign people to it. And the A is the most important one. Like if that thing doesn't work, the A is on the hook for it. And it's a useful way to frame a project, a problem, whatever. And I think in the military, these were born out of natural hierarchy and mission hierarchy, basically organizational structure, and the operations order process.
Okay.
But here it's just a different way of describing it. And so that A has a lot of, they're accountable for what goes on that project. And I've seen that be very useful. The one downside, and I would say this is a key lesson that I've learned over time, you can't have two people accountable for the same thing, right? Like you got to have one person who is ultimately accountable for the success or failure of something. I think the military does that better than anyone.
I love it. That reminds me of an experience. Having one person that is held accountable for the success of a project. I don't want to go into too many details, but there was a lawsuit, a property type of a lawsuit about a septic tank within my circle of influence. And it came down to the fact that within the rules, there are diffuse accountability. There's 3 or 4 different people that are responsible for different pieces of that project. And through litigation to try to get a problem corrected, everybody can do this. And so the buck never stops with anyone. So there's no recourse if you don't have one person as a single point accountability. We've already made money on this podcast right here, at least in my brain, because I learned a new aspect of specific accountability for an individual. Single point allows the tools to hold someone accountable. Otherwise you get.
And I think, man, if you don't mind me just saying, I think if you're young, just going into the workforce, doesn't matter what you're doing, military, private sector, whatever, like there are going to be moments where you're given an opportunity to lead and be accountable. And those are pivotal moments in your career. And you need to take the accountability very seriously, like understand what your scope is and drive it forward. Yeah. It's huge.
That's awesome.
And it's not always, you might have to push a little bit to see it and get that clear line. But once you got it, you need to, it's in the military, it's like win in charge, take charge. And we're kind of designed around that, but not everyone is. So if you're young and you're listening to this and you get a chance, like you got to step into that role and take that accountability, which also means if it goes wrong, not blaming someone else and saying, hey, this is on me. This is why we messed up. And here's how we're going to do it better.
Yeah.
And I do have one anecdote I would love to share. Like as you approached me on this, Vince, I was thinking about accountability in my own life. And I have a very vivid memory of the first time I realized what like true accountability was. So this was my junior year of college, and it was with a guy who I interviewed. Actually, probably the 4th interview I did, a guy who's a lieutenant colonel right now, a Green Beret, posted overseas, Jordan Becker, great guy. Okay. So he was a senior, I was a junior. The junior year in ROTC in the academies is a huge year. Like it determines what you end up doing later on in the military.
Yeah.
So you're constantly evaluated. I was in charge one week for running some field exercise. We get out there, we execute, things are going pretty well. We have one thing that doesn't work. This guy, Jordan, comes up to me, he's evaluating me, and he's my friend, which makes this even harder.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey man, how come this thing didn't get done? And I immediately was like, well, that's because Bob had that. He didn't get it done. And he just very quickly snapped out of friend mode into like, hey, that's not okay. That's on you. You were in charge. that thing didn't get done, that falls back on you. And I distinctly remember this happening, and it was like a light bulb moment. So every other time I was given a chance, it was very clear, like, this is what we have to do. Okay, we got to make sure it happens. And if Bob's not going to get it done, we got to have a fail safe. Like, we got to think about these things in advance, and I don't have an opportunity to pass the buck to anyone else.
Yeah. So that the light bulb moment, I love it. That's good stuff. It's like read Jocko's book, and that's
Yeah.
that's like a great example of Jocko's extreme accountability, I think is what it's called.
Yep. Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership. Yeah. Sorry. Got that.
Oh
word
yeah.
right,
No, it's good.
now. Dude, that's good. That's important. What about the other side? So you're holding people in your family or in your sphere accountable for things. How do you project that lesson in a manner that is okay with someone who's not born in the military or has gone through the military?
I will say, I don't think that's my strongest suit. So I think we all work on something. It's very easy for me to take accountability and ownership and drive something because it's just been ingrained with me. But doing that with others is very difficult. And that's on the personal side, which you've alluded to, like holding your own kids accountable, your family.
Yeah.
That's difficult because you want to maintain a positive relationship. And it's easier for me with my family, in the house, like the relationship we have, but it's much harder, certainly harder in the private sector, I would say. So how do I go about doing that? I, as a leader, and having managed for many years now, I tend to give a lot of room to maneuver, to say, basically, for my team. So we talk about what their roles are, and I love them coming up with ideas and driving their interests home. But there are times where you've got to hold somebody accountable for what they're doing. And it's critical. And I'm learning this a couple years into private sector now. How you scope a plan and project early on will make that much easier for you.
Okay.
If you have a project that has kind of an ambiguous end state or unclear execution roadmap, you're going to have difficulty holding someone accountable later because they won't know what they were expected to do at the outset. Gotcha. So it's very hard to later come back and in a positive relationship growth type way, hold them accountable, where you can have a positive relationship on the other end. But if it's clear what you're going to go do and it's not hit, it's a little bit easier to say, hey, we're just not hitting the mark here. What's going on? And it's not doesn't put anybody on the defensive, I would say.
Yeah. So you have to kind of treat the relationships maybe a little bit more in the private sector, like a lateral or horizontal relationship where there's a inherent vertical relationship with the military, and it's kind of hard and fast and understood. There's kind of this dominance relationship in the military, but you've got to approach this holding someone accountable without asserting dominance, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot more soft-handed.
I think it is. I think it requires a little bit more diplomacy, not a ton, because you've been there, Vince. Like when you're out on a mission, you can tell somebody to go do something. They might go do it, but it's way better for them to buy in and be willing to accept what you're saying. Super hard to get to that point. It requires those same soft skills. But I do think you're right. Like, even though you nominally sit as the manager or the leader, you really have to secure that buy-in from people, and so you can leverage accountability appropriately. Okay. And it does make me think, in the private sector, what I see, you have chief of staff roles, as opposed to in the military where you've got an aide, but really it's more like an XO or your senior NCO, your first sergeant, your sergeant major, that help you make these decisions that you don't really have in the private sector. And I think it's important. It helps with accountability because you've got somebody who is able to give you advice in that sergeant major role, whatever, the XO role, to advise you. You can talk about accountability. You might be the one who's still accountable in the end, but you have somebody to help influence and plan this out. When you get into the private sector, until you get to a pretty senior role, vice president, senior vice president, CEO, you probably aren't going to have that that component to help drive decisions with you. And it's been a little bit difficult, I would say, not having that right-hand man or woman by your side to help out.
Yeah. Okay. Where are we looking right now? We're coming up on 30 minutes. Let me see if I can get some more sideways questions in here.
All right.
Maybe a fun one. Do you do any like CIA techniques on your family?
Oh man, I gotta say, we're kind of like sworn to not use the force outside of
You can't.
outside of those environments, but I do use it occasionally when it's helpful. But it doesn't work because my wife is like the best case officer on the planet, and
Oh, okay.
there's no way you
She's
can.
in the know. She can't get. Yeah.
No, she knows me too well. I can't get anything by her. The kids, they're still I can still get to them.
Still susceptible to.
That's right. That's right.
The bait and switch or whatever it is you guys were taught. What about? How about this one? Has your work at the agency shaped your ideas on how to be good at life as a human being? Like remove United States or whatever communities and just global human. Have you learned how to be a better human from having the perspective gained from the agency?
Definitely. Although I would say it probably comes more from meeting people in other cultures and seeing the world, and less so that it was with the agency. It just happened to be you meet different kinds of people who are very influential in whatever circle they sit in. But I think just having that understanding of how other people live, how great we have it, and how we really cannot take that for granted is what I learned there. You know, whether it's rolling through the streets in North Africa or even in great places in Europe, we just have it so good here. And you're right, like pushing the US to the side as a global person, just understanding how good we got it, that was a huge takeaway for me with the agency.
That is, man, that's great to hear. I think a lot of people need to hear that. That's kind of been lost. What is it? The saying that hard times create hard men and easy times, or there's a saying that applies to this where in easy times, it creates a lack of recognition of how good you have it, and people start complaining about smaller things. Is the intent of the saying that I've forgotten, but
I think it's I've heard hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. There's a little bit of that where making those hard decisions probably is going to make your life easier in the end.
Yeah. Well, I love it that a guy that's been out there and seen multiple cultures, been around the world and walked in the shoes of many different countries and cultures and lifestyles and upbringings, comes back and sees a reflection of massive value in what we have where we are in the United States. And that's important for a lot of people to just recognize how good we got it. I love it. Let's see, what else do we got here? Here we go. We're coming up on about 40 minutes. So I'll make this the last question and see if you want to talk about any other topics. If you could, is there anything you'd go back and tell your 20-year-old self to be a better man?
Man. So first of all, that's a great question. And I hope you ask everybody that so you can kind of have this rolling single point. Yeah, there is. I keep a notebook on lessons that I've learned and what I want to pass on to my kids. And it's more influenced towards the professional side, like just how to be, it doesn't matter where they go, the military. I've got 3 boys, Vince. So like maybe one of them goes into the military, maybe none of them do. I have no idea. It doesn't matter though. These are those things that apply regardless of just being a good employee, being a good person, having that integrity and accountability. So I have about 20 of these rules almost that I would call them that I've cataloged over time. And I try to, at work, I will try to show those in my actions to the people that I work with. And I'm not going to sit down and say like, hey, read this. But there will be a time where I sit down with my son when he's like probably 16 and we go through it, just talking through like, hey, as you start meeting people now for the rest of your life, it's really important how you build these relationships. And that's like a key for me is early on setting him up for success, setting myself up if I were going back in time
Yep.
and building really strong relationships from the beginning with that in mind, with the long game in mind.
Yes, that is awesome. I would love to get my hands on that list.
I got to type it up, man, because I got to get it to my son one day. And I really do just want him to hear it from me at some point, but I got to get it into a coherent format. So
yeah, you know what?
Maybe I'll get it there.
There's your next book right there, man.
There you go, man.
I bet it's bestseller, because that's the kind of stuff that I think people are really longing for in our current hypersensitive internet-based culture right now. That type of content is stuff that is like a beacon of light in this swirling pit of garbage that's out there.
Yeah.
So that content is kind of like a goal for me to kind of attain something that's substantive, that, like you just talked about, that list of 20. I want to develop through these podcasts that list of 20 for me that creates value for my kids. And dang, I'm so happy to hear.
I'll say, Vince, like the talk that I had with you and these other guys that I've interviewed, I mean, I would love to see one day I would do something similar with a book that comes out that's showing the lessons learned. A lot of the folks who listen to Combat Story will write to me and just say, and a lot of them aren't vets. They're just, doctor wrote to me today, business analyst yesterday, just saying, like, these are really useful life lessons we're hearing about, like striving for excellence. As you talk to guys who are in DevGru or Delta and these different units, like pushing for excellence, being ambitious, not being an asshole, not being a jerk along the way.
Yeah,
all
you
of
can say
those
asshole
things.
on this podcast.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure here. I wasn't sure. I got to check myself. But yeah, I think there's a lot of, there are lessons like that along the way. And I've learned them from talking to you and others. So yeah, paying it forward.
Good deal. Let's see if I missed anything. Nope, that was my kicker, the last question. Well, much respect. I think we got the content that we wanted. Did not disappoint. Thank you very much, sir. And maybe we'll have another round down the road.
Hey, Vince, can I ask you one?
Yeah.
What does accountability mean to you?
That is kind of like step 2 in I'm developing a philosophy on the process of being a good person. And you've got to have, interestingly, the Air Force has their core values, and it's integrity first. And I think that's the foundation. I think I was disappointed so many times. I was a naive idealist when I joined the Air Force Academy and found a bunch of things that happened that kind of shook my foundation. And I realized that, okay, just because not everyone is being 100% with their integrity, it doesn't mean I'm not. I should be. And I recognize the moments in my life, and they stick with me, where I did not have my integrity, and they rippled through many aspects of my life for a long time, and they should. When you compromise your own integrity, you lose your foundation, your credibility, your ability to cultivate positive energy in your relationships. So integrity first is the foundation, and then accountability becomes a lot more complex. And that's why I'm digging on these podcasts for distilled ideas on the subject, so that I'm better at interacting with people that haven't gone through the military life, and I can hold people accountable using language that is encompassing them in my circle, instead of doing an us versus them or a dominant power relationship establishment to hold them accountable. It's more like, this is why you should try to be as accountable as possible in your life, and encircle them into my circle there. I just think that accountability, holding yourself to your responsibilities, and holding the people who have espoused a responsibility within your sphere to maintaining that responsibility and following through, that's me holding them accountable for their responsibilities, is the way to create positive and sustainable energy within your own circle.
Yeah.
If it's based on lies, it's all fake. There's nothing true there, and it's bad, negative energy. So that's a little bit of a discussion on, I'm not sure if I specifically got to your
No,
question,
right on.
but so I'm trying to develop, a couple sentence, quick little distilled down thoughts that some 20-year-old that's like I was 20 years ago can write it down, and maybe it'll create a little bit of a path change that is a good one for that guy's life. So that's why we're here.
Yeah. Love it.
Good stuff. All right, man. Combat Story Podcast. Check out the website, check out his podcast, and thanks for joining Get Better Every Day with Snapper. We'll see you next time.